They say, what is it that I can do to help you? And Mr. Speaker, I was hoping that that's what this government would do. Remember that the government was elected, Mr. Chair, to represent all Nova Scotians, not just a few and not just special interest groups. But it appears, Mr. Chairman, it appears that that's not the case. It appears that some of the people who are in the government benches think that they owe a debt to a certain segment of the population here in the province of Nova Scotia. And that's why my heart is heavy, because that's a sad, sad comment on where we stand in the province of Nova Scotia. Now, there's a lot of questions as to why the opposition is so upset about this bill. Well, I can tell you why I'm upset, Mr. Chair. I'm upset because the people that gave me the honor to sit in this House are upset. They've called. They've said to us, there's something not right. Now, the government says this is a housekeeping bill. Imagine. It's more like a house cleaning bill. A housekeeping bill with 158 sections in it. We have had bills in this House, in this session, with less than 60 words in it. But a housekeeping budget, a housekeeping matter about this bill is hard for me to understand. Now, I had a message from one of the people in my constituency, and I think it says it all about what the people are thinking at home. After reading Bill 100, I am appalled that this type of legislation would even be considered for a vote in the legislature. The requirement that a small business owner post a bond during the appeal issue seems totally unfair. Surely there must be another method without placing the financial burden on the back of the small business owner. As the owner of a small business that has been incorporated since 1963, I advise you that during that 47 years of our operating, any labor issue that may have arisen was accepted and dealt with, and the decision was never appealed. The acceptance of successor rights, as described in this bill, would cripple the competitive process that has been worked and fought for by small business community for decades. This bill is to establish a labor review board consisting of 10 people representing unions and/or unionized employers, without the inclusion of any non-union people or non-unionized small business owners. It seems to me that if owning and operating a unionized small business in this province was something we thought we required, or that the customers demanded, then we would have walked down that road many years ago, and there would not be any business owners, small business owners, who weren't unionized. I respectfully request that you vote against this bill, short of the acceptance of the amalgamation of Nova Scotia's labour boards. And that's just how one small business person in our community feels, Mr. Chair. The unfortunate part, he's not alone.
He wants you to table that, Alfie.
No problem. I'd be happy to table that. Now, we all know in this House that this bill will pass. The government has a majority. The Premier is flexing his muscles and saying he's going to make it happen. But what's the hurry? What's the difference if this bill passes now or passes in the spring session? What is wrong with parking it and finding out what the small business community is worried about? Now, the members opposite will say on many occasions that they don't understand. Well, the best way for someone to understand is someone to take the time to explain it to them, to sit down and talk to them. We're not asking for the world to change. If you are so sure on that side of the House that this legislation is good for the people and the small business community and the workers who are non-unionized in this province, then why will you not take the time to sit down and explain exactly what the bill will do and how it will affect each and every one of these non-unionized people and these ununionized businesses. We know in this province of Nova Scotia that 80% of our activity is done by small business. We know that a large majority of the people in this province of Nova Scotia do not even belong to a union. Mr. Chair, I've belonged to a union, I've worked in a union, I've worked in a union environment, and I've also worked in the areas where there were no unions. I have nothing to say bad about a union. However, with that being said, there are people who don't belong to unions, and I have nothing bad to say about them. They are hardworking, honest Nova Scotians who are trying to feed their families and who are trying to make sure that what they're doing is the best they can to provide for their family and their children. And what we're asking the members opposite to do is give them that opportunity. Make sure that those individuals who aren't in a union, who are feeling like they're being ganged up on by a piece of legislation being brought down by this House, by the men and women in this House. They're saying, why would you do that to us? Why would you put us in such a peculiar place when we know that you're there to try to do what's right for the people of Nova Scotia? Now, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, many times in this House, in this debate, we've heard about the Premier's words. But you know, it never hurts to repeat something which I believe actually is quite sincere. When it was said, the individual was quite sincere. And it was Tuesday, September the 4th, 2001. I believe a good measure of a government is how it treats its workers. The NDP caucus understands that a safe, creative workplace leads to a more productive workers and a stronger economy. Now, this is the interesting part, Mr. Chair. Government will always certainly go awry if they develop labor or any other policy without involving those who will be affected by it. I have said frequently that the key to good government is to listen to people's needs and involve them, Mr. Chair, in their government. I don't know, Mr. Chair, what has happened since September the 4th, 2001 to December the 7th, 2010.
Order. Order. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite tabled the document to which he referred. I note that the name has been removed from the document. I think it's well established in this House that anonymous documents, anonymous emails are not permitted. I would ask the member either to table a document with the writer's name or withdraw the document.
Yes, I can rule on that, Minister. That is the proper procedure of the House to keep the point of order that you have established. So the member has the option of removing it from the record or providing the House with the author of the email. I recognize the member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that wise ruling. And as a matter of fact, I will not be tabling the document because the individual did not want his name used in the House of Assembly. He said I could use the material. However, do you want an explanation or don't you?
No, they don't listen anyway. They don't bother.
The man was scared of retaliation by this government. Now, Mr. Speaker,
Order. Order. The member for Cape Breton West has the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I hear the member for Cape Breton Nova talking about Tony Soprano. Well, you know what, Mr. Chair? He should know about that because he's sitting over there with a bunch of people that have no respect for people's rights or the interests of the small businessman in this province or the union, non-union workers who are trying to survive in this province. They keep on telling us that they're here to help people, but, Mr. Chair, they're only here to help themselves.
Order. 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 Would the honourable member allow for an introduction at this heated moment?
All means.
I recognize the member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad I can be the referee here to break it up. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make an introduction to the members of the committee today. We have a great resident of Hammonds Plains, Christina Parker. She is very involved in our community and serves on various committees and societies, and she plays an important role in everything that in our community. So if the members could give her a warm welcome, please.
I recognize the member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, as I said earlier, this bill will probably pass. I still have a problem understanding the hurry. It is so important that what we do in this House is right. It is so important that we get it right the first time. Because when we're dealing with labor standards, when we're dealing with the issues of people's employment, when we're talking about successor rights, well, Mr. Chair, that has a direct effect on every Nova Scotian. And yes, there are people that are worried if they speak out that there will be retaliation. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have to be careful what type of legislation that we pass. So if we're going to pass it, and they have the majority, and they are going to be able to pass it whenever they decide that they want to, why can't we take the time to make sure that the people understand what the provisions are about? Did you know, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, that on October the 19th, a number of people were taken into the Justice Department and Labour and Workforce Development and met with their officials. And these were learned individuals who understand the labour laws and the labour codes of the province of Nova Scotia better than I ever will. And they looked at this piece of legislation and they said, this is not bad legislation. Will there be any other provisions or statutes added to this? And they were told at that meeting on October the 19th that no, this is the bill. And yet when that bill was introduced in this House, there were provisions added on to the end of it. So then we go to law amendments. And we have people in law amendments, again, much more learned than I, having a better understanding, and who have respect in labor matters right across this country. And 13 out of 15 percenters said there's something wrong here. This is not the bill we saw. This is not the intent of what we were supposed to be doing. And we have 158 sections to this bill, this so-called housekeeping bill, trying to change the full intent of what they had agreed to on October the 19th. Now, I wouldn't expect anybody in the government side of the House to take my arguments and run away with them and say they were gospel. Wouldn't expect that. I'm not naive. But I would expect that when you have people go and present their case in front of law amendments, when they tell people in law amendments their concerns and the reasons for their concerns, that indeed would be enough reason for us as members of this House of Assembly to have a second look. to review it and make sure that those issues are addressed. And it's no different than what you would do in your own household, Mr. Chair. When you have a dispute within your family, you sit down, you describe your side of the story, you listen to their side of the story, and you make your case as to why things are the way they are. But we don't hear that here. We hear it's myths, it's non-truths, it's nothing's going to happen. We know right, you know wrong, we're going to move forward. Mr. Chair, what the Premier said in September of 2001 is how we should be operating today. And I don't understand how you can move from this side of the House to that side of the House and lose that very value of listening to the very people that gave you the opportunity to form government in the province of Nova Scotia.
Like you fellas didn't change when you moved.
Now, Mr. Chair, the Minister of Health seems to have an opinion on this matter, and I would be more than pleased. I would be more than pleased to sit down and listen to the Minister of Health, because she's a very smart lady, and I have the greatest.
But she's not allowed to talk.
I have the greatest admiration for her.
She's not allowed to talk.
But Mr. Speaker, rather than the government members explain why we're wrong, all they're going to do is say, you don't know what you're talking about. Gee, I could go home and get that.
His wife would agree with him.
You know, Mr. Chair, one of the members have asked me if my wife is unionized. She was. She worked very hard in the healthcare system, but she doesn't do that anymore because of a disease that she has, a disease that affects her and our family. But you know, she certainly would not be one that wanted to see a non-unionized person penalized for not being a member of a union. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, in a nutshell, at the very least, there is confusion amongst Nova Scotians, Nova Scotian workers and their employers in particular, in regard to Bill 100. Because of that fact, Bill 100 should be withdrawn now and brought back in the spring with appropriate consultation and clarification. Everybody, as far as I understand it, Mr. Chair, is in agreement on the merit of the proposed new Labour Board. Now, there are some people who believe that the name doesn't reflect the broad sense that it should. But in general, the premise of bringing the boards together is something that's been accepted by both unionized and non-unionized workers across this province. And it's also important to acknowledge the fact that there's talks of an independent, fair-minded person to be appointed as the full-time board chair. And there are requirements for that individual, the same as there should be for the vice chair. There is a small matter of the fact that this legislation has not even gone through the House, has not even reached third reading, and there has been an advertisement placed to hire said individual. Now, I would say, when you look at this great institution that we're in, and the fact that we have the ability to serve in this House, 250 years of representative government, this House is the very institution that a number of other parliaments across this country have based their formats on. I would think that the government and the ministers of this crown would at least have the courtesy to make sure that a bill passed before they took something for granted and went off advertising to hire an individual for a position that has not even yet been passed in this House. And that is what we call respect. Mr. Chair. It's about respect. I had the honor the other day to speak to a classroom full of young people, grade 11 and 12, and they asked what was the most important thing that I thought that we needed as a legislature and we needed as being members of this House of Assembly. Well, I thought then it was respect. I think today it's respect. And I think that if we don't respect the institution, we don't respect the positions within the institution, we are not doing a service to the people who elected us to be here. So you would think that a government who says they're going to put the House back to work, a government that says they want to listen to the people of Nova Scotia, you would think they would respect the very institution that houses the government that they're part of. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. The example of this ad is only one. We could go and we could talk about individuals that were shunted out of this house and because they had the ability and the bravery to speak their mind, but we wouldn't go there. We wouldn't go there. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. We are concerned, we as the opposition are concerned about the lack of consultation with the appropriate parties in connection with this certain parts of Bill 100. And those are the parts, as I said earlier, that don't relate to the board itself. We would like to see the Labour Management Review Committee that will continue to evaluate the Trade Union Act to include representatives of the overwhelming majority of workers and employers not involved in the union workplaces. Mr. Chair, there is no legitimate reason why these individuals don't deserve a place on this board. They are the majority of the workers. They are a majority of the people that are providing employment. And they are the people that selected the individuals that represent us in this House. Yet we have the audacity to stand here and say, no, you don't deserve to be represented on this board. And I don't know about you, Mr. Chair, but I don't think that's fair, and I certainly don't think it's right. You know, Mr. Speaker, in Manitoba, where there is an NDP government, non-unionized workers and employers are indeed represented on the equivalent committees. So I'm hearing from the Minister of Justice and the member from Pictou East that it's good government. And they are saying that it's great government. Well, I don't live there, so I don't know. What I do know is at least they have this common decency to recognize non-union employees and small business owners when they're building boards and putting forward legislation that's so important to the very fabric of what makes up that province. Now, Mr. Chair, there's also some concerns about the successor right provisions of Bill 100. While the provision in some ways just enshrines traditional practice, by so doing it, it does formalize a practice currently decided on a case-by-case basis. And Mr. Chair, what's wrong? What's wrong with looking at situations on a case-to-case basis? Because there is no cookie-cutter solution for everything that takes place in this province. We know that when we talk about ERs and how they're operated. We know that when we talk about the Department of Transportation and the different operations that take place there. What works in one place doesn't necessarily work in the other. By doing it on a case-by-case basis, as we've been doing all along, we have an opportunity to make sure that the worker, is fairly represented and treated. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing here? Truly, looking after the rights of those that selected us to come to this House of Assembly. So, Mr. Chair, our party wants the government to allow Bill 100 to either be amended, and earlier today the Premier said he is open to amendments. Now, at law amendments, that certainly wasn't the case. There was nobody open to any amendments there. They shut her down and they moved her on. But there's still a chance to correct the mistake. There's always a chance to correct. The most important thing that we as politicians should be able to do is admit when we are wrong. To stand up and say, we've looked at it, we've listened to the people of the province of Nova Scotia, and we've decided that we did not hear and do everything as we should have, and we want to make changes. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, the people of the province of Nova Scotia would respect that in this government. They expect that in this government, and they deserve no less than to get that from this government. Unless the government acts positively, we will continue to vote oppose Bill 100 and debate it in every way we can in this legislature. This course of action will help provide Nova Scotians with a better understanding of how and why this bill really is anti-worker, anti-economic growth, and actually a job killer. This bill, as it now stands, Mr. Chair, is a piece of junk. But you know what? As I said earlier, we can straighten this out. Collectively, we can make this bill work for the people of the province of Nova Scotia, for the non-unionized workers, for the small business owners, and yes, for the government. So why, again, I get back, why are we in such a hurry? What is going to take place in the next 4 months that never took place in the last 18 months? Because it took us 18 months to get here today. We're asking for another 4 months to look at where things are. And at that point, all the members of this House will have an opportunity to speak with their constituents, explain to them what's going on, hear from the small business community, allow the small business community to have the input that they should, because I can tell you, Mr. Chair, this government certainly does not have any problem taking taxes from the non-unionized workers. They have no problem taking taxes from the small business community, and they have no problem taxing them well beyond their means in some cases. So now they need to be heard, and what we're hearing from the government? It's myths. They're wrong. They don't understand. Well, Mr. Chair, when your children don't understand, you sit down and you talk to them, and you explain to them. Our role as members of this House of Assembly is to make sure that the people we represent have an opportunity to hear why we think a bill is good or bad. And then, well, the Minister of Justice says that's the Tory perspective. Well, if he thinks that I'm going to apologize because I want to listen to the people of the province of Nova Scotia, he's in a trip in Disneyland. Of course, being a member of that government, we like Disneyland because there's more characters there than there is in Disneyland.
That's true. That's true.
Well, you know,
Mickey Mouse government, that's why.
when Mickey Mouse wants to run the operation, if he wants to talk to me like that, I'll talk back to him.
I see.
This,
Civic League Club.
because I am very concerned about the people I represent, and I care about what they have to say, and I listen to what they have to say, not like that Minister of Justice and not like those people that he surrounds himself by. He should be ashamed of himself.
At least Mickey has ears to listen.
But you know, Mr. Chair, that brings me to another point. And that point is this. If the Minister of Justice doesn't like what I have to say, I probably won't be able to sleep till I get to my bed. However, it's not me, and it's not only me that's saying that. It's amazing how much he has to say, but he won't get to stand up in this House and explain to the people why this bill is such a good bill for them. He's the same fellow that takes the boots off the street because he says, you don't need more police, you just need to manage them better. Well, you tell that to the people that lost their daughter in Glace Bay, that they don't need more. Oh, now, you know, the minister's over there telling me it's not appropriate. He's right. It is not appropriate for someone in this province to lose their child. It's not appropriate. Now, Mr. Speaker, he says I'm wrong about what I say. I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that. But let's see what the people who have written that open letter to the Premier had to say. Who were they? Well, and of course, we've all heard these names, but it's the Atlantic Building Supply Dealers Association, the Atlantic Recreation Dealers Association, Canadian Council of Grocery Distributors, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the Canadian Restaurant and Food Services Association, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, the Construction Association of Nova Scotia, the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, the Halifax Dartmouth Automobile Dealers Association, Merit Contractors Association of Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia Automobile Dealers Association, the Nova Scotia Chambers of Commerce, the Nova Scotia Home Builders Association, the Office of Employer Advisor, Offshore-Onshore Technologies Associations of Nova Scotia, the Restaurant Association of Nova Scotia, the Retail Council of Canada, the Nova Scotia Natural Gas Association. So, Mr. Chair, I can understand why some of the members of the government would think that I was wrong. I can't, for the life of me, understand how they can think that these many people who contribute so much to the economy of the province of Nova Scotia can be wrong. Why is it that we don't want to talk to them? Why is it we don't want to listen to them? Mr. Chair, there's so much that we should be doing in this bill. We should be either subtracting the pieces that the people have never heard about on October the 19th, or we should be sitting the whole bill so that we can indeed have an opportunity to hear more from the people that it has the effect on. The former Premier of this province used to have a saying. He used to say, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And with this bill, it's not the wrong time to do the right thing. And the right thing is to sit that bill so that people will have an opportunity in small business and non-unionized work to move forward, explain their situation, and hear from the members who say they have the answers, what the answers are. Now, to be quite honest with you, Mr. Chair, this could be changed later tonight, after I sit down. All we need is for someone on that side of the House to get up and give the explanations. Tell us what it is that we're so wrong about. I've been wrong before, but I have not heard anything in the debate so far to explain to me why these individuals who are going to be directly affected by this bill are indeed wrong, because I don't believe they are. I think they have a right to be concerned. I think they have a right to know what it is this will take place and why this bill has come to delight in the way it has. Now, Mr. Chair, there's so many different things that have taken place in this last little while over this bill. And sometimes we all get a little bit hot under the collar, and I'm no exception. My intent here is to do what I think is right for the people that I represent and that we as legislators represent, and that is to find out what this bill is all about. We have had the opportunity in this House to talk about all kinds of legislation. I heard earlier we heard about the clothesline bill, one of those bills that had 60 or 80 words in it, a few sentences, and that was important, and it got debated in the House. We've been hearing about the sun tanning bill, and we've heard from many people in that industry. And one of the things that they had to say was, we weren't consulted. Now, Mr. Chair, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I do know that's how the industry feels. The industry feels that they have not been consulted. The people of the province of Nova Scotia don't feel that they've been consulted on that bill. So there seems to be a trend here. We're going to pay, we know better. We as the government of the province of Nova Scotia know better. We can tell you what's good for you and what's not good for you. Now, I have to be very honest with you, Mr. Chair. Until the other night when they brought forward the bill on sun tanning, there was a lot of issues there that I didn't know. But the fact that it's used for medical purposes and for helping treat different situations has made me aware that this is something that's important. The same way as those people who provide small business in this country. We heard the member from Digby Annapolis earlier talk about how many businesses he's been in and how he was involved and never belonged to a union. The reality is he's not the exception. That is the way that many, many Nova Scotians have been. They raised their families by working hard, by doing what they thought was right, and by paying their taxes and voting on election day, hoping that the people they elect will represent them in a fair way. And now, even I have to question how fair this bill is. And I'm a strong and true believer of this institution. When you look around and you figure that you're one of 52 members that sit in a House of Assembly in a province of almost 1 million people, the honor to have that ability to stand in this place is quite remarkable. There isn't a day that I don't come through those doors, Mr. Chair, that I'm not in awe of this chamber. And although there are people in this room that we disagree with from time to time, I firmly believe that all the people in this House are here for the right reason. They're here to do what they believe is best for the people of the province of Nova Scotia. But like anyone that's trying to do what they believe is right, sometimes, Mr. Chair, they make a mistake. And I think this bill is an example of a mistake that was made by this government. There's not much left that I can say, except that indeed we all have to remember why we're here. We all have to remember what this House is supposed to do. We are here to make sure, to the best of our abilities, that the people of Nova Scotia have the ability to live a good life. There is no greater place on the world to live than in the province of Nova Scotia. We have everything that anybody could ever want here. We have good people. We have a reasonable climate, although there are a few days that we'd all disagree on that. We have some of the most beautiful and scenic areas in the world. And I think we have one of the strongest houses in the country. The reason that we're here is to help the people that elect us. And if we can't, as a collective group, identify the fact that we need to listen more, that we need to have a second look. And maybe after that second look, Mr. Chair, we might be right back to where we are today. We might say, we were wrong. There's nobody over here on this side that would mind admitting we were wrong, in my opinion, as long as we listened to the small business person and the non-unionized worker. And if they say this is where we should be, then I think, for one, I can only speak for myself, but I will be there to vote for the bill. But I will not be there to vote for this bill if we do not get the proper consultation, if we do not listen. Now, the Premier has said that this bill is going through in this session. Well, I remember a time when I was here before that we actually had to sit between Christmas and New Year's. And I'm willing to do that again, if that's what it takes. That's how important this bill is to the people of this province. That's how important it is to the non-unionized workers in this province. And that's how important it is to the small business owner. So, Mr. Chair, we would either make the appropriate changes now and wait, or we can stay here and debate this till the cows come home, so long as they don't pull the house over. But, Mr. Chair, we can also, you know, Mr. Chair, it's good that the members have still got their sense of humor, because it's important. Because the business we do here, Mr. Chair, is very, very serious. But sometimes we make a mistake and take ourselves too seriously. We have to remember that the reason we're here is not for what we think, it's for what the people that we represent think. So, Mr. Chair, if I could sum up, I guess where I'm at is this. There is no reason to be in a hurry. There is no reason for us as a group of people to believe that what the Premier said in 2001 wasn't what he truly meant to do. There is no reason for us to rush through a bill in a House where the government has the majority. There is reason to listen to the people of Nova Scotia, the small business people, the non-unionized workers, the very fabric of what makes our province so strong and so proud. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I would take my place.
The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you.
740, Neil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and pleased to join the debate on Bill 100. And you know, during this session, we have seen a lot of housekeeping bills. A lot of bills that haven't been very substantive, a few words, a few phrases, a few sentences to be changed. And this was put forward in much the same context. In fact, following the theme of this session. You know, as some have now coined it, the Seinfeld session. We haven't really done much work until the last few days. And in fact, the last days of this sitting before Christmas, and if we continue into the new year, in fact, could be the best days for the opposition, the best days to enlighten Nova Scotians about this piece of legislation, a so-called housekeeping piece of legislation, in fact, that has many unknown in the fullest labor and legal context that, in fact, are still being talked about, investigated, and trying to come to a better understanding of Bill 100. Because unlike most of the bills that have come before the legislature this session, this is the Labor Act for the province. It is a significant piece, obviously, of legislation, supposing to have had an overhaul to some extent. But, contained within Bill 100, in fact, are a number of disturbing aspects that could be brought into law in Nova Scotia. As somebody who has spent her entire working life as a member of a union, and a very proud member of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union. In fact, I was a union rep for a number of years and on different occasions, and gained an understanding of the value of being in a union and part of a union. And I can certainly inform this House, and there are probably many members know, that there are currently members, well-informed, well-read members of the teaching profession in Nova Scotia who do see some deleterious elements about this bill. This is not 100% endorsement from union members in Nova Scotia by any means. And we're starting to see now a growing voice, a better informed voice about what this bill is all about. In fact, we know that, there's really the minority who are unionized members in Nova Scotia. And in fact, we need to be addressing all workers in this province, which in fact, the very title of the bill, an act to create a unified labour board. Right away, that hit our caucus, you know, because we should be really talking about, you know, a unified employment board. Because every worker in Nova Scotia is to be valued, is to be recognized for the contribution they make to the economic well-being of the province, and therefore beneficial to the quality of life we have in Nova Scotia. So we should be talking about all workers, all those who are employed, and not just to union members. So you know, this is what now a growing number of Nova Scotians are starting to take a strong look at. I mean, it does start off actually in a pretty harmless and in a way that most of us concur with. That in fact the consolidation of various boards, providing that the board's mandate is clear and it will be dealing with issues involving both unionized and open shop employees, it could be seen as a positive step, but we know that the non-unionized are not included. They're not part of this act. They're left out of this so-called labor, which should be embracive and in fact be named the Employment Board of Nova Scotia. And so while it had this kind of you know, benign and aspect to it, we know as this bill is drilled down that it has some you know, very disturbing, a number of disturbing provisions. And just to quote Heather Cruikshanks, her take is that these provisions were made without any public consultation or announcement and dramatically increased the power of unions in Nova Scotia at the expense of non-unionized workers who make up, of course, more than 70%. And this is the aspect that I have heard about in the emails that I have received. That this is not the path. This is not the course of action that Nova Scotians expected and anticipated from this government. And this is a very, very important time and moment for the opposition, that we will take whatever necessary time, necessary steps to point out to Nova Scotians that this was not a bill built around consultation. But in some ways, you know, that is what's been going on. You know, I'm very familiar with the Minister of Finance's you know, back to balance tour. Well, that wasn't true consultation. It was a prescriptive process that was put before people. It wasn't open dialogue. So why would we be expecting, you know, a great change in the way this government is conducting the business of Nova Scotians? They came to power on the basis and the premise and the principle that we would be a true open government. We would be truly open to hearing from the people of Nova Scotia. We would be consulting on an ongoing basis. And this, of course, is in fact in direct contrast to that kind of prescription that had been put forward. So without consultation, you know, we've now taken the bill through law amendments, and we heard in law amendments a number of the pitfalls, the deep concerns that very informed Nova Scotians have about labor law in this province, and now we're moving this bill, you know, through the House. Yes, it's going to take some time, and whether by then, as we get a wave of backlash, perhaps you know, on third reading, there may be the possibility of introducing a few amendments. And we'll have to see as time goes on whether that becomes the reality. You know, a labor management review committee, you know, again, is a very good, can be a very good thing. It is only in one province currently, so it's not something that has wide endorsement. It's in the province of another NDP government, but even there, they decided that non-unionized members would make up part of that management board. You know, we need to include a wide spectrum of the labor force, a number of different sectors, and we know that in the letter, and I think it's worth putting back into the record. You know, the letter that recently came to the Minister of Labour and Workforce Development, and the letter to the Premier. You know, there's a growing number of bodies that represent tens of thousands of workers in Nova Scotia who want government to slow down, take a second look, and make the necessary amendments to this bill. When we're talking about, you know, the Atlantic Building Supply Dealers Association, highly regarded in this province, Atlantic Recreation Dealers Association, Canadian Council of Grocery Distributors, Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Now, you know, I can see government, you know, perhaps eliminating them fairly quickly. They were eliminated around budget time last year. They had some, again, very considered points to bring forward. You know, when they consult 5,000 members, you build consensus, you get a sense of what's happening on the ground in Nova Scotia, because small business is truly the economic engine of this province. And again, their voice was not adhered to during that process. So that's one group that, you know, the government could easily dispense with. The Canadian Restaurant Food Services Association, from one end of this province to the other, they have, again, a significant membership. Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Construction Association of Nova Scotia, the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, Halifax Dartmouth Automobile Dealers Association, Merit Contractors Association of Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia Automobile Dealers Association, Nova Scotia Chambers of Commerce, Nova Scotia Home Builders Association, Office of Employer Advisor, Offshore Onshore Technologies Association of Nova Scotia, Restaurant Association of Nova Scotia, Retail Council of Canada, Nova Scotia Natural Gas Association. So, you know, we are hearing from not just the leaders of these organizations. Some of the emails that I've had reflect, you know, the voice that the leadership has put forward to government in letters like the one that several members have referenced today. So, Bill 100 would require employers to make a security deposit if they wish to appeal a decision of the Labour Board. It does not extend that same requirement to everyone. Obviously, this is a completely unfair and uneven application of cost recovery. We all know that, you know, for small business, for independent business, you know, putting up money, and if it's a considerable amount of money in an appeal process, it could in fact eliminate their appeal. Just that simple. When we take a look, you know, the stats are there to speak for themselves. You know, 1 to 4 employees, 31% of Nova Scotians who go out the door each day to work go to a business that has less than 4 employees. business that have no employees, that, the self-employed make up 42%. 5 to 19 employees, 19.4%. And then the smallest number are 20 to 49, 50 to 499, and only a handful of businesses in our province that have over 500 employees. So we're prepared to eliminate the voice of small business, the self-employed, those that, in fact, through the toughest times in Nova Scotia during the recession, we were fortunate as a province not to be hit nowhere near to the extent as Central Canada, nowhere near what they felt in the Eastern Seaboard and the auto belt of the United States. But that's the businesses that came through the best. Harvard recently released a study looking at both a longitudinal study and also highlighting the recessionary period. And again, it was the small business who came through the best during the recessionary period and had to release the fewest of workers, kept their payroll and their output fairly well intact, had the flexibility to make work hour adjustments and not lose valuable employees. So we need to be given greater credence, greater credibility, and greater support to small business in whatever way we can in this province. So they will have appeals, Mr. Chair. They run into challenges and disagreements, and Bill 100 could eliminate that appeal process. If the government wishes to recover some of the administrative costs associated with Bill 100, again quoting from Heather Cruikshanks, it should do so equally between employers and employees, particularly when many employers are small and medium-sized business of fewer than 20 employees. So that's the dilemma that small business is facing in this province. And just to take a little further look, CFIB, again, hasn't been standing on the sidelines when it comes to Bill 100. They agree with a unified labor board. They had a discussion paper titled Consolidation of Labor Relation Boards and Employment Tribunals in Nova Scotia. They've been strong proponents of this kind of consolidation, of this kind of united process that would make them a more effective and perhaps a more timely body in responding to whatever appeals that would come their way. And they've also added a lot of research data to the amalgamation of these boards and tribunals. So, however, CFIB echoes what, again, independent business, some larger sized businesses have been talking about, the posting of bonds. And they raised a question around, what's the evidence that the current system is not working? I think that's a very, very legitimate question that the CFIB has put forward in this debate. But when there isn't that deep and focused consultation, then these, that's one of the questions that is out there, unanswered, government not willing to debate and bring greater light to that kind of question. A very legitimate question. The old saying, don't fix what is not broken. And if the system around dealing with, the need for bonds is not, it's not, what's wrong with the current system, in other words, that we need to do this. 1 out of 4 appeal decisions are overturned. Board requirements could tie up cash flow of small business for months at a time. And we've already pointed this out. And this is one of the areas that if you talk to small business people, is keeping a cash flow to deal with, sudden challenges they have around the overhead requirements in their business. Severance of an employee is leaving. They don't have that large amount of cash flow that may be required if they're going to put in an appeal, especially in relation to contracts that they felt they had every legitimate right to have garnered, and want to find out more of what went on during the process. Well, the area that has concerned, I think, most of the business community in Nova Scotia is, of course, the successor rights and the transfer of work when there has been a transfer of work from the public sector to the private sector. Work done previously by government employees or union workers would have to continue to be done by union workers. Well, this is the one. In fact, this was probably the one part of this bill that sent up the red flag and caused many to take a look at and the kinds of impacts that it would have. We know that there are tremendously well-qualified, very capable businesses, ones that bring innovation, efficiencies, new approaches that come along, and many of them driven again by the private sector that could be left out of the process. In fact, the interpretation here, and this is an area where there seems to be a pretty strong groundswell of unanimity around the interpretation of this bill, that the successor rights are going to mean that very statement that I just made and will repeat. Work done previously by government employees or union workers would have to continue being done by union members. And it would effectively shut non-unionized businesses out of the running for outsourced government work. And so, again, we want greater competition. We could have, again, some specialized, companies that government has had long-term contracts with, but a new private company, if they're ruled out of the running in a competition just by that very fact that they aren't unionized, then I think successor rights are a part of this bill that needs to be revisited, and there are still many questions unanswered. Once again, the question around in terms of successor rights, obviously no consultation on this piece. A lot of questions that CFIB are asking, and again, non-CFIB members are seeing, again, the red flag on this issue. And again, many, what isn't working with the current system? That's where we need to have that kind of information coming from government to let the Nova Scotia business community, the small business, the self-employed, know what's wrong, what's broken. And to whom would it apply? To whom will this apply? Why aren't employees able to choose whether they want to continue to be represented? What is the private sector's view on this? Will it impact contracting out? Will it limit the options of this and future governments? So, you know, these are questions that, again, you know, will linger and attach itself to this government, you know, for years to come, because there's, you know, Bill 100 is going to go through. Whether there'll be a break point, a weak point, the need for it is showing up. The longer this bill goes on and Nova Scotians gain a sense of the kinds of impact that it will have, then it's one that we need to address. It's interesting, you know, the timing of this piece of legislation. As we all know, not our plan, but government's plan was in fact to end the session today, recess the House, have the House rise until the spring session. But you know, we're prepared to stay here, prepared to come back early in the new year. This is what Nova Scotians expect of their elected officials, that they come here, they work, get the job done, but they also like, you know, honest debate when real issues of concern come before the House. So it looks like we're not going to have too many members who will stand in their place and, you know, be very candid, be very truthful about the nature of this piece of legislation. And that's what now Nova Scotians are counting on the opposition to bring to the floor of the legislature. So over the coming days and weeks and whatever it will take to bring more insight, more enlightenment on Bill 100, then we'll try to gradually work it out of government. There are many out there who are drilling down on this piece of legislation as each hour goes by, and we will bring that perspective to the floor of the legislature. When it comes to the you know, the Labor Management Review Committee, I need to, you know, to reiterate once again, no consultation. The elimination of about, you know, 78% of the workforce of Nova Scotia. You know, to me, that shows an unenlightened perspective about employment in this province. That there isn't the highest regard for all those who go out the door each day to make a living for their families. And the vast majority of Nova Scotians, as we know, you know, they live, you know, they're only a paycheck away from meeting with that personal family disaster. And these are the people that we need to be in this House working for, speaking on their behalf, having them as part of the Labour Act in Nova Scotia. To be very, very selective as this piece of legislation is proving to be, is one that we will speak long and hard and often to point out the pitfalls that are coming before us. We should be talking about every employee. We must you know, review this piece of legislation and find a way to correct the inherent difficulties that it has. You know, the Labor Management Review Committee, a mandate that says to report on, make recommendations to the Minister on Labour relations issues on an ongoing basis, and conduct a review of this Act and other relations statutes or any part of them. So here we have a 10-member committee that is entirely one-dimensional, a unidimensional committee that is not going to have the voice of other workers other types of businesses. In fact, the elimination, in some cases, of whole sectors of employees. That's what really stands out when you want to bring in some of the fairest and an accommodating Labor Act in the province, and when this comes up for review, because we know workforces, work environments are going through enormous change. Therefore, the Labor Act has to renew itself, and to have it, to have the employees of our province have, a major segment not having a voice is, I think, the real, deficiency in this piece of legislation. The fact that we spent time during this session to talk about a clothesline bill, to talk about anti-idling. That's where this session has not had hasn't had a lot of legislation that will be highly regarded by Nova Scotians when this session is reviewed. So we now have at the end of the session a piece of legislation, Bill 100, that was designed for quick movement through the House. We've been here since the end of October. Christmas approaching. We'll all throw up our hands and say, well, let Bill 100 go through. Well, the more that we drill down on it, the more that the business and work community of Nova Scotia takes a look at this piece of legislation, we now know that it has as inherent challenges and ones that, again, it's incumbent on the opposition to bring forward. When this bill briefing, was done, that was the time when when you're doing an overhaul of the Trade Union Act, and really the minister gives a very positive, upbeat. This is a pretty benign piece of legislation. Well, that's what got everybody, peaked to take a look at what's in this. Coming in at the 23rd hour of the session, presented as a housekeeping bill, a piece of legislation that was not going to trigger any great changes in the way business is conducted. Well, that in itself, the way and the timing was what alerted those that would take a hard look at this and know that their business could be impacted. The business climate in Nova Scotia could be impacted. And here we are at a time approaching 10% unemployment in this province. We have to be doing everything, in fact, that's going to engender, a greater leveling of a playing field, more conducive to business. We've had a report just, last week, that this is, it hurts to hear it. Doesn't matter what side of the house you're on, but Nova Scotia does not have a competitive business climate. It's not where companies should be taking a look at. So when that was stated last week by, again, a person who would like to do business here, but it now is finding with the corporation tax. And we were pleased that the NDP government did start the process of looking at one of our campaign planks, which was to reduce the small business tax from 5% down to 1%. In January, yes, they're going to take 1% off, but again, no plans for right now a systematic reduction of the small business tax. You know, and again, the corporation tax remains high. So here we are, you know, already in an uncompetitive climate, and we are seeing, in fact, that this piece of legislation, Bill 100, could weaken that competitiveness and the business climate of our province. So now we know, you know, why we're hearing from individuals, we're hearing from entire sectors of workers in this province to stand back and take a second look. You know, we don't have a Senate, you know, to give that sober thought to legislation. So it's incumbent upon the opposition to point out weaknesses that are in a particular piece of legislation. You know, the letter to the Premier. Again, I wanted to highlight a couple of parts of it, and so you know, I think this came just yesterday. Was sent to the Premier, and I think what's really compelling here is when anytime you pick up a document, and as legislators, we hear from lots of individuals. And as we reaffirmed here in the House tonight, you know, we have to, in fact, have it endorsed by an individual and have them sign a document to be presented in the House. We can't just do, you know, something willy-nilly off the top and just submit it into the records of the House. It must be a bona fide document signed that we need to present. Now, this particular document starts off on behalf of tens of thousands of employees in Nova Scotia. We are writing to continue to outline our strong concerns with the Labour Board Act and its potential impact on the province's small and medium-sized independent businesses. It is our hope that you will only move forward with this piece of the bill that the public was consulted on, which was merging 6 existing Labour and Employment boards into one new Labour board, and remove the pieces that the public were not consulted on. Now, we know that, you know, government has done some consulting. They've also talked about consulting, but it was very limited in its scope. And you know, we know that when we've had great pieces of legislation built on strong consultation, on great feedback from the population of Nova Scotia, you don't go wrong. You don't go wrong when you listen to Nova Scotians and what they see is in the best interest of their province, the future of their children, the future of grandchildren. You know, we all come here, you know, and I don't mean just with idealism, you know, that we certainly see that fervor from new members, but, you know, my colleagues, all sides of the House here, they want to do things that are in the best interest of Nova Scotia and the best interest in fairness and in justice, and that is accommodating of what is in the best interest of a modern labor force for our province. Now, this bill 100, you know, has an Achilles heel. It has some anchors attached to it that are not in the best interest of a strong and vital business and small industry sector for this province. And this is why this bill, you know, needs the brakes put on it taken a look at, and some of those pieces that are outlined in this letter to the Premier that should be taken from the bill or modified after consultation takes place. And until now, we have been mostly pleased with government's efforts to seek Nova Scotians' input on matters that affect them before decisions are made. For this very reason, we are extremely disappointed to find controversial changes hidden in Bill 100's complicated legal wording, such as extending successor rights to the public sector, requiring employers to post a bond when appealing decisions of the Labour Board, the establishment of a Labour Management Review Committee, LMRC. So, you know, a housekeeping bill, you know, you don't have to be a Labour lawyer. You don't have to be a lawyer. You know, just taking a look at this bill, you know, raises grave concerns about how we will eliminate, you know, tens of thousands of workers in Nova Scotia in the process of, you know, whether it's an appeal board, whether it's changes to the Labour Board Act in the future. These are the areas that concern Nova Scotians. And, you know, we are most concerned about the creation of the Labour Management Review Committee, which would review and recommend changes to the province's labour legislation, and that specifically, we hope not intentionally, prohibits non-unionized workplaces from participating. Now, you know, many of us here in this legislature have been in a union, or if not in a union, you know, we know many Nova Scotians who aren't members of unions and are part of Nova Scotia's workforce, you know, working to make a living for their families, working to contribute to our province, and again, have so much to offer on what are good labor practices, good labor standards. We see this going on in very, very small workplaces across Nova Scotia. You know, this shouldn't be, you know, geared to, you know, the large labor unions to set forth some of the best workplaces in terms of worker safety, accommodation of the workers' voice as contracts are negotiated. In fact, we have, of course, in this province, many people who work side by side each day, where you have union employees and you have non-union employees, in fact, who come to the same workplace. And, you know, this is the kind of development I think you will hear people say has the potential to be divisive in the very nature of having something enshrined in legislation. And so this is the call that's before this legislature now, is in fact for us to slow down and work towards having a united workforce in this province. And it would start off by, in fact, the very name of this bill, that we would get the word, you know, employment in here as opposed to just labor. So there's a lot that needs to be revisited about Bill 100. And for this government to say to all Nova Scotians, let's take the Christmas recess, come back in January, and consult with Nova Scotians, and have us take another look at how this bill can be strengthened, how it can be improved, how it can be accommodating to the entire workforce of Nova Scotia. So, you know, it's unfortunate that, in fact, at, 9:23 on Tuesday evening, we have to be in the chamber debating this bill when, if there had been real, open, thoughtful consultation, this bill would not arrive here in the manner in which we see it today. You know, here we are in the province as a result of heavy spending by government in its first 18 months. Again, has added to the debt of the province. Now, therefore, as a consequence, we're talking about significant cuts in education, ones that will have, a detrimental effect on the education system. We already have boards who are cut to the quick. They have sharpened the pencil for a whole number of years. We know that the HOG formula was not fair to all boards in this province. So you know, we have serious health issues. In 3 out of the last 10 days, the ER in my riding has been closed, or the ER that is used by a significant number of constituents in my riding. We had a report just a week ago, 14,000 of our young Nova Scotians live in poverty. You know, these are the issues that should be before the House, and that this government is taking a strong, concerted action to dealing with these. And this is what this government at the end will be judged on. What are the real changes? What are the effectiveness that government policy, good public policy, has been initiated, a chance to play itself through the system and positively affect change in our province. We know that good public policy, one that, I've been a believer in, is the strongest early education program that you can initiate, because that's where real substantive differences can be made in those early years. And we could be on the verge of penalizing those very young learners, children in our province that won't get the good advantages that they need. And other jurisdictions have said, this is good public policy. You know, I was very, very pleased when in the very early days of this government, the Minister of Health stood in her place, and I know she has a real keen sense of obligation and compassion towards those with autism, and she said that if we could find a few more dollars so that there isn't a lottery system in our province to give the early professional help to children who suffer from autism, and that would be incorporated in a budget. Well, you know, the first budget has gone by and nothing is there. We're hoping that perhaps this year, a few pennies, a little bit more can go towards that needy group of young Nova Scotians. So there are a lot of issues that we could be and should be remaining here to bring to the floor of the legislature to reflect the concerns and the voice of Nova Scotians, and have had real consultation on Bill 100, and it would have been a better piece of legislation, a fairer piece of legislation. You know, our legislature It's getting late, I guess. You know, we know that the principles of justice and fairness and the common good are what it has been built on over 250 years of democracy. And this piece of legislation is prepared to eliminate 78% of the workforce in the Labour Act that will guide this province's future. So that is not a very strong case to have Bill 100 passed. You know, in fact, the very opposite. That argument, you know, flies in the face. It's the antithesis of how we should be conducting ourselves and bringing legislation before the House to be passed and to be enacted that will go on to change and impact on the lives of Nova Scotians. So, you know, I don't have a lot of time left. And I just want to draw upon a couple of other, comments that have been made in the last few days. There's a number who have, have pointed out that it's all about, as Brian Johnson says, courts will use that language to interpret the Act in a union-friendly manner. So the very nature of this bill will, in fact, precipitate decisions and advantages towards the union when there are appeals to the tribunal, and if then it were to go on to provincial or Supreme Courts for further adjudication, then the Labour Act as it's written, the Trade Union Act as it's written, in fact, has a propensity towards favoring that kind of outcome. These are the kinds of comments that we should not allow just to be written. These are the ones that we should be really working to act on and to make sure, in fact, that this bill does have at third reading some amendments come forth, or government pull it for today and come back and in a new year. And it goes on, while the preamble might give the government's union wonks the kind of goosebumps they normally feel only on May Day, it's hardly worth fighting over. Well, we now are hearing from a groundswell of Nova Scotians that, in fact, are calling upon government to take a serious look at Bill 100. When we look at the makeup of Nova Scotia, we know that small business will be the anchor of our economy for decades to come. They are pretty much eliminated in this Trade Union Act. And if we're going to, recover, build a strong economy, then we should have Bill 100 working to give us an advantage. There will be companies we know that look at all jurisdictions during their time of seeing what are the advantages of relocating. We have a number of mechanisms. We have Nova Scotia Business Inc. We have, rural economic development. These are, when businesses are contacted, there's a very strong criteria. There is a detailed assessment that goes on to determine their location here in Nova Scotia. So we need to be giving ourselves every possible advantage. Bill 100 puts some disadvantages for companies that may take a look. Now, you know, I haven't consulted at the highest level around Bill 100 and Michelin workers, but I've had a few who have contacted me, and again, there are elements of Bill 100 that is causing them concern. And so if we get a major company such as Michelin in our province, that whether they will, you know, formally or informally find a way to stake out some of their concerns in Bill 100, you know, we may see that come forward as well. So those are sometimes the unintended consequences when a piece of legislation comes before the House. That you know, it may not unfold quite as intended. It may not account for all of the unique companies and sectors and the workforce that we have here in our province. So over again the coming days and weeks, we will hear a great deal more from Nova Scotians about how Bill 100 will impact their lives now and in the future. And so I'm hoping that we will find a way to review Bill 100 before it becomes law in this province. And I'll pretty well, I only have a few minutes left. And again, I think one of the best articles that has been put forth so far is Heather Cruikshank's, and she ends off with a really powerful paragraph. Bill 100 not only threatens our future in this province, but that of every non-unionized worker in Nova Scotia. Quite simply, it needs to change. The government of Nova Scotia needs to delay passing this potentially damaging piece of legislation until it has consulted with the very people it will affect and make appropriate changes. So that's a very powerful statement. It's one that we in this House and government should not neglect. I do sincerely think that this piece of legislation will be one that companies will use against locating in this province. This is something that we cannot jeopardize. If companies come here and feel that they may be eliminated from government contracts, from having that equal opportunity because of the service, the product that they offer, then that very often can be, a significant baseline for companies in the kind of contracts. We know the kind of contracts that government has in all sectors across this province. So I think the word will spread. This will, in fact, be put forward as a very real impediment towards attracting business and industry in our province. And this is a foothold for our economic future that we need to be advancing, correcting on the taxation aspect. This is why our party has called for a comprehensive tax review. We know the kind of taxes we need to run the province, but again, let's have a fair system. There are people in this province, there are people now in many jurisdictions around the world who've actually announced to government that they would be prepared to pay more taxes to make sure that we have the kind of health, that we have the kind of education, that we have the kind of social programs, in fact, that make for a strong community, a strong jurisdiction, and that's where, in fact, we need to be on the business side of things as well as on the individual side. Very often, of course, the two go together. Individuals who are well off have had a very successful business, in many cases, to get them to that point. But, you know, we know that revenues in a number of areas of this province are in decline or in a stagnated manner. And to bring forth Bill 100, in fact, that could be another obstacle to having, again, a recovering economy in this province is poor timing. And I think we will see even some short-term impacts of Bill 100 when it goes through, and there's no question that it will have long-term negative impacts for this province. I think that it has been it's simply poor timing. I don't think it's fear-mongering on the part of the opposition. There are 5 key aspects to this bill which will cause great concern in the short term and have even greater consequences in the long term. I thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak on Bill 100.
Thank you for those remarks, Honourable Member. I now recognize the member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, it's with regret I have to rise this evening to speak on Bill 100, the Labour Board Act. And the reason I say regret is because we're dealing with a piece of legislation tonight and for the last few days and many more days to come that could severely and negatively impact the workforce in Nova Scotia. You know, Mr. Chair, some people think the role of opposition is just to oppose. And a lot of times we do exactly that. But, Mr. Chair, if this government had brought in this bill with only what they had consulted on with the many businesses in this province, we would be saying, great job, a great bill. But what did they do? They attempt to hide things in this bill with no consultation, unless it was with some union bosses or people from Manitoba who seem to be the ones offering the advice on this and many other bills that are coming forth from this government. Mr. Speaker, oftentimes during this session, we've seen bills come through with 1 or 2 lines on them, 60 words, but the government thought that by presenting a bill with over 150 clauses, the items that were causing concern today would go unnoticed. Not so, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Nova Scotia has had about 20 years of reasonably successful labour management relations. Compared with the records of other jurisdictions, we've had relative labour management peace. But this government wants to take the balance we have been enjoying and throw it out the window. When this bill came forward, Mr. Chair, the government held out significant parts from discussion. They're now saying that these are simply housekeeping provisions. Not so. If it's simply housekeeping provisions, why are businesses coming to us as opposition with their concerns? The government made it clear that they're attacking private business in Nova Scotia. Mr. Chair, let me read a few letters that I'm sure many members in this House have received and maybe you should take notice of. First one, I'm only going to use a small segment from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, an organization that when our family business was a member for over 25 years and proud to be a member of that association. Mr. Chair, and quoting, and this was a letter that was sent to all members of CFIB, it says, the only aspect of the bill that anyone was consulted on is the amalgamation of Nova Scotia's labour boards. CFIB was consulted and has no major concerns with this aspect of the bill. However, other aspects of the bill came as a surprise to everyone, and these surprises were unveiled just over 1 week ago. Unions say these are good surprises. We think otherwise. Let me also, Mr. Chair, and maybe this is something that the members opposite, especially the Metro members, should pay attention to, and it's from the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. And it's addressed to the Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development. It says, we are adding our voice of business, 1,500 members strong. Mr. Chair, the Metro members might think some of those 15 members might be some of their constituents. We are adding our voice to those of other business groups who are expressing strong concern regarding clauses added to Bill 100. Post-consultations with business groups in July of 2010 and at recent briefings on the bill. The original intent of the bill to create a unified labour board was laudable. However, and seems to be however comes up in every form of correspondence that we receive. However, the bill looks to have moved far beyond that intention, and most importantly, without any consultation with the business community. Issues of particular concern are, number one, the establishment of a Labour Management Review Committee. What is the proposed mandate, responsibilities, and importantly, the composition of this committee? Number two, requiring those who take over government functions under a contract for service to also, by legislative requirement, accept the union that represented the government workers who performed the function, the collective agreement that they operated under, and one can only assume all the employees. This could significantly limit current and future government's abilities to explore private sector-based solutions. It would also significantly limit the contractor's ability to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the service. Number three, requiring employers to post a bond when appealing a labour decision. It would seem, Madam Minister, that thoughtful reflection is needed for full consultation on what these clauses will mean to business. With the tremendous fanfare last week releasing the province's economic development strategy, Jobs Here, it would seem very untimely to be considering labour relations policy that could weigh heavily on Nova Scotia's businesses, particularly the small business sector, without proper consultation. Please note how many times the word consultation is used in this letter. As you know, small businesses make up a majority of businesses in our province. If you're asking business to step up, this is not the time to put barriers in their way. We are asking you to delay this bill and take the time to have departmental staff discuss the new additional clauses with the business community. It always takes much less time to get things done right the first time than to fix them later. And that was signed by Valerie Payne, President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Chair, we also, every member of this House received a copy of an open letter to the Premier. And some of the government members might recognize the names of those that endorsed this letter. Gosh, they might even be voters in their constituency. So let's go through them again, just for everybody's knowledge. Atlantic Building Supplies Dealers Association, Atlantic Recreational Dealers Association, Canadian Council of Grocery Distributors, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Canadian Restaurant and Food Services Association, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Construction Association of Nova Scotia, Halifax Chamber of Commerce, Halifax Dartmouth Automobile Dealers Association, Merit Contractors Association of Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia Automobile Dealers Association, the Nova Scotia Chamber of Commerce, Nova Scotia Home Builders Association, Office of Employer Advisor, Offshore Onshore Technologies Association of Nova Scotia, the Restaurant Association of Nova Scotia, the Retail Council of Canada, and the Nova Scotia Natural Gas Association. Quite a list, Mr. Chair. You know, Mr. Chair, the NDP say there's confusion about the effect of Bill 100 and the proposed legislative amendments. They say the objective of Bill 100 is to modernize the Trade Union Act, which affects unionized employees and creates a consultative function to ensure good labor relations. Mr. Chair, two words stand out in that statement: unionized and consultative. The 15% of the unionized workers in this province should understand that the issue of Bill 100 is not an attack against them. The same as the Minister and her minions in the Premier's office are in full damage control, Mr. Chair, after the Premier labelled private business in Nova Scotia as disingenuous. Let me give you what that word means. It means not straightforward or candid, insincere or calculating. Mr. Speaker, what a slap in the face of small business in this province.
You have the definition of
He labelled those private businesses and believes that it's important for you, and we believe it's important for union members and the representatives to understand their concerns. In fact, Mr. Chair, the Centre for Independent Business clearly states that they have no issue with Bill 100 and the amalgamation of boards. They deserve more consultation in respect for the democratic process, not a single-handed, unilateral attempt at pushing a few amendments through the House. Mr. Chair, as mentioned numerous times in this House, the private sector is extremely important to Nova Scotia. They're concerned about the far-reaching implications of Bill 100 and are asking the government to come to its senses and seek consultation on all aspects of this bill. Here's what the private sector does for Nova Scotia. The creative sector, which includes the arts, cultural, and design industries, is increasingly recognized for its potential to contribute to a healthy, vibrant economy. This private sector-led industry is vital to Nova Scotia's success. Small businesses with fewer than 50 employees, including businesses with no employees, represent 97.4% of the total business establishments in Nova Scotia. The total number of business establishments in Nova Scotia, 54,414. Mr. Chair, in 2009, there were 60,600 self-employed persons in Nova Scotia, making up 13.4% of total employment. And I could go on and on, Mr. Chair. But, Mr. Chair, demographics also should suggest that Nova Scotia is dependent on private business to export products in order to retain economies of scale and keep our economy moving. We need to export our goods and services to achieve economies of scale and to bring wealth into our province. Mr. Chair, consultation is paramount to ensuring good labor relations. I'd like to read a few quotes that I think you might have heard before a few times this evening, which weigh heavily on our argument that this entire process has lacked any significant consultation. This is here you go, Mr. Chair. These were taken from the Chronicle Herald on September 4th, 2001. And I quote, I believe a good measure of government is how it treats its workers. Another quote, governments will almost certainly go awry if they develop labor or any policy without involving those who will be most affected by it. And finally, and again I quote, I have said frequently that the key to good government is to listen to people's needs and involve them in their government. Mr. Chair, those words were written by Premier Darrell Dexter in 2001, when he was fresh, idealistic, and relatively new to the political scene. I ask, what has changed since then? What has changed since then? If we even dissected his comments for 1 minute,
Order, please. I would ask the honourable member to remind the honourable member that we do not use names in the chamber. We use the honourable Premier. Thank you.
I will not use that name again.
Thank you.
Most other people would not want me to use it again either. Mr. Chair, even if we dissected his comments for 1 minute, you'd see that he once believed that consulting with the public obviously meant something to him. What happened? What's changed? Mr. Chair, this is about listening to people's needs and involving them in their government. Yet, we see such an outcry for consultation while the Premier and his minister minimize input from the business community. The Premier should stand by his words, especially when a very important and vital segment of the population and our economy has spoken out on this issue, Mr. Chair. They need to be heard and respected, not ignored in the interest of ramming through provisions that will only appeal to 15% of the workforce. Mr. Chair, the Minister has said the successor rights clause of Bill 100 does not impact on existing successor rights for private business. We haven't said that it would, but we're very worried that enshrining this tradition in law will seriously impact on the ability of private sector businesses to successfully bid on certain government work. The Minister seems to think that enshrining tradition in law is simply a housekeeping matter. Not really. Sometimes it's best to let matters be settled on a case-by-case basis. That's really how the English common law system and tradition has developed over the decades and centuries. Mr. Chair, it's all very well and good to say that extending successor rights will not force private business doing contract work with the government to be unionized or take on the civil service collective agreement. But the simple fact is that some labor organizations and their lawyers will see this rule differently from the Minister and will misinterpret the rule, thus causing endless confusion and need for clarification. There's another myth that has been mentioned, the Labour Management Review Committee. The Labour Management Review Committee should include representatives of non-union workers and their employers. After all, Mr. Chair, they are by far the majority of both workers and employers. Mr. Chair, in NDP-governed Manitoba, there is non-union representation on the equivalent committee. Just having union folks consult non-union folks, Mr. Chair, just doesn't cut it. Everybody, and I mean everybody, needs to be represented at the table. That's common sense, and it's fair. Mr. Chair, the amendments essentially grandfather union successorship to a private company, therefore automatically installing union representation on private employees without the democratic right to vote. What's not known is how this new provision will be interpreted by the new board. And so, it leaves private sector employers being reluctant.
Order, please. I would wonder if the honourable member would adjourn debate in the committee of the House.
Yes, I will, Mr. Chair. I'd like to adjourn debate.
Thank you. A motion for adjournment has been made. All those in favour? We have 2 more members asking for a recorded vote. So we will now ring the bells up to 1 hour, or unless the whips are satisfied. Thank you.